Welcome everyone. It's great to have you all here for Law Week Law Talks. And we're very excited for this session being run by Youthlaw about consent and respectful relationships. To begin today, I'd like to say that the Victorian Law Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country, wherever you may be joining us. The officers of the Victorian Law Foundation sit on Wurundjeri land. We pay respect to their elders and to all the generations of Wurundjeri and other First Nation peoples and acknowledge that the land was never ceded. We recognise the impact of colonisation, its legacy of injustice and the marginalisation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And we believe that acknowledging the past is an essential step in building a better, more equitable future. The Victorian Law Foundation aims to break down the barriers to justice for all Victorians through our work in research, grants and education. We are genuinely committed to making a contribution to a better justice system for all of us, especially those vulnerable and in most need. Look, I'm just going to run you through a bit of housekeeping before the session starts. Cameras and mics will remain off for all attendees. This webinar is being recorded. Chat function is reserved for technical issues, but we would like you to use the Q&A for any questions, and we'll do our best to address these either during the talk or we'll forward you answers after. We will run live polls during the session and we'd love you to participate in those, and you will receive the slides and recording after the webinar. Now, I would really like to introduce you to our presenter today. Tim Hutton is from Youthlaw and he's going to be presenting on consent, sexting and respectful relationships. Youthlaw is a free legal service for young people under 25. Tim is the outreach lawyer with Youthlaw and his role involves visiting youth centres in different parts of Victoria to deliver legal services to young people. Tim's primary expertise is in criminal law, which involves representing his clients at various courts around Victoria. Prior to working at Youthlaw, Tim was a criminal lawyer at Victoria Legal Aid. So I'm going to hand over to Tim now, and I'm sure you're going to find this a very interesting and worthwhile session. Thank you, Tim.
Fab, thank you for that introduction, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's a privilege to be talking to you today about this really important content. What I'm going to do first is share my screen and pull up some slides. Give me one moment. Okay. Right, so as Fab said, today's session is on consent, sexting and respectful relationships. And I'm a lawyer with this place called Youthlaw, which is a community legal centre, as Fab said, a niche community legal centre just for young people under 25. So firstly, what I'll do is I'll just give a little bit more information about who we are and what we do, and then I'll get stuck into the presentation. As Fab did say throughout, please feel free to put questions in the Q&A and I will do my best to respond to them. If I can't get around to them, what I'll do is I'll copy and paste them out and send an email to all registrants with answers or responses to all of them. That's just in case the presentation goes for longer than I anticipate and I don't get time. So we'll see how I'm going. So Youthlaw, as you've heard, free legal service for young people under 25. We have a phone line available every day, 9 to 5, and you can call us essentially about any legal issue that a young person under 25 is facing, and that can be yourself if you're under 25, or it can be you on behalf of someone that's under 25, so long as it relates to someone who is under that age. Please feel free to give us a call anytime between 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Our details will be on the end of the slides, which we'll send around as well at the end. Or you can give us a call. There's also an email address which you can use if that's the preference. Now, what are the sorts of common legal issues that we help with? There's some on the screen here just for your knowledge. Key things we sort of see are things like fines and debts, criminal matters where we represent people at court, victims of crime applications, family violence issues, all those sorts of things. So on to the main part of the session, which is the content. So I'm going to start with a little discussion around respectful relationships. This is really talking about what consent is in a more broader context than necessarily what the law says itself. Then I'll be moving on to consent laws. So actually, what does the legislation say? What does consent mean? What's the definition? But also, what are the age of consent laws? So for teenagers, what is the age gap that's legal? We'll talk about that. And then lastly, very similarly, we'll talk about sexting. So what is sexting? What do the laws say around sexting? What are the age gaps and age requirements around that as well? I should also note that in the second part of the session around consent laws, I will be opening up a interactive quiz. It's using a platform called Menti, if anyone's heard of that. It's similar to Kahoot. I think a lot of people have heard of Kahoot. It's a different website. And so I'm going to suggest if anyone in our audience has access to a device where they can go to this website, it's very easy. You go to the website, you plug in the code, and then you can engage in the interactive quiz with me, and I'll be running it. So I am aware that some of our audience is classrooms. And so I'll just give you a moment now. Maybe I'll give you maybe a minute or so in case there are devices somewhere which aren't turned on. Maybe you can grab them now and have them with you so that when we do that interactive quiz, the students can go ahead and log in themselves. So I'm just going to hold on half a minute, just in case you need a moment to do that. And when I am doing the quiz, I'll be mindful that classroom groups might take a little bit longer to answer. So I'll just give you everyone a moment just in case you need to get access to a device to have with you when we get to that part of the session. I'll just hold on this slide for a moment. I should have also said it, just another part of housekeeping. The session, it's really a 1 hour session with a bit of the front end and back end. So I'm planning to finish up about 10:20 or 10:25, hopefully with some questions at the end. So just in case you've got something to go to after that, that's sort of where I'm planning to wrap up. I'll just give everyone a little bit more time in case you need to get a device out of a bag or something. All right, thanks for bearing with me there, and hopefully that was helpful for maybe some of the audience who have students. But if you don't, if you just have one device, you can just log in using the one device, and as a team, you can decide which answer to plug in. Anyway, so the first thing we're talking about is more, I'm calling it respectful relationships, but it's more a discussion of consent broadly, not necessarily what the law says. We'll get to that in a moment. But this slide gives, I guess, an indication of what to think about broadly when we talk about what is consent. The key thing, in my view, that is on this screen is the bottom left, which says enthusiastic. So an enthusiastic yes is what consent is. Enthusiastic because obviously consenting to sexual activity is a big deal. It's really important to be consenting, and it's really important to make that clear to the other person. So an enthusiastic yes, that you should be excited to be saying yes. But also other really important things on this slide are things like it has to be freely given, obviously, without pressure. It's reversible and ongoing, meaning that you can say yes now, but you can say no to the same thing tomorrow. Or you can say no in 10 seconds, if you like, or in 1 second. And similarly, it's ongoing. It doesn't mean because you consented now that you're consenting tomorrow or next week. Consent always, every single time, has to be an enthusiastic yes. And it's really important, if you're engaging in sexual activity with another person, to respect the other person and ensure that they are giving that enthusiastic yes, and that they are excited to be doing it and not feeling any pressure or anything like that. I am going to play this video, which is sort of talks about similar sort of things I've just talked about. It's a nice sort of way to start the session, I think. So I think actually I've got to unshare my screen. Give me a moment, sorry. I I've just unshared and I'm going to reshare because I think I didn't use video, which is my fault. Bear with me, share sound. All right, share. Okay, back to this screen. Hopefully you can hear this and you can see it okay.
It's really important to understand what giving sexual consent actually means, emotionally and physically.
And knowing what laws are here to help protect you and keep you safe.
Imagine asking your partner to have sex is like asking to use their mobile phone.
Can I use your phone?
What might they say?
You'd think that there was only two answers, right? Yes or no.
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. But first, let's deal with the simple part.
So, can I use your phone?
No.
That's pretty easy to understand. They don't want you to use their phone. You might feel a little bit upset that they don't want you to use their phone just now or anytime soon.
But worse things have happened. You'll just have to wait until they're ready to let you use their phone.
And you shouldn't pressurize someone into letting you use it.
Give me your phone.
No.
But if they say,
Yeah.
This is where things get a bit more complicated.
they might say,
Sure, you can use my phone to make a call.
but this might come with conditions like,
You can only use it if it's to make a short call.
Can I send a text message?
or look at your photos.
Or show this to my mates?
Doesn't mean you can use their phone whenever you want without asking.
Giving you permission to use their phone for a quick call does not mean you can use their phone however you want or whenever you want.
And sexual consent is exactly the same.
So if somebody says yes to something like a kiss, this doesn't mean they're saying yes to anything else.
And having sex once does not mean you can demand sex again whenever you want without asking.
And if your partner can't give you an answer for any reason, this never means yes.
And not saying no does not mean yes. You wouldn't just take someone's phone if they hadn't said yes, would you? Hey!
So when you think of it like that, there are similarities between asking to have sex and asking to use someone's phone.
And the best way to understand what your partner is happy with is to talk about it.
It might feel a little bit awkward at first. You might get excited or nervous or worried.
But it does get easier. And remember, not as many people are doing it as you might think.
It is so much better when you both know what you think.
Remember, when someone asks you, it's up to you.
All right. I'm aware that that was lagging a little bit, but hopefully it was good enough for you to sort of get the message that was being made by the people talking. And it's sort of the same sort of things I'm talking about before, which is consent is an enthusiastic yes. It's specific and it's about now. It's just because you've said yes now doesn't mean you're saying yes tomorrow or later on. Very, very sort of obvious things to be mindful of and to be respectful of when you are thinking of engaging in sexual activity with another person. So going to turn now to consent laws. So we've talked a little bit about what is consent more broadly and maybe ethically and respectful relationships. Now I'm going to talk to you about what does the actual law say consent means and what are the age bracket limits on consent. Give me a moment. So consent, this is taken out of what's called the Crimes Act. So in the Crimes Act, it says engaging in sexual activity without consent is an offence. And consent means free and voluntary agreements, which is a pretty broad and vague sort of term. But what the legislation does do is it lists a number of things that are not consent. So I'm going to pull them up here on the slide. So these are the things that the law says are quite clearly not consent. So, and some of them are very obvious and some of them are things that have already been discussed. So fear or force or any sort of fear of harm that pressures you into giving the consent, that means there is no consent. If you're held against your will, if obviously you're unconscious, whether that's because you're sleeping or because you're intoxicated. The fourth one is incapable of understanding, which basically means if someone is too young to understand what they're consenting to, or perhaps they have something like an intellectual disability, which means they can't completely understand what they're consenting to, even if they are saying yes. That means that there is no consent. And I've got a few more on this next slide. Mistaken about the identity of the other person. So basically, that is the really obvious example where someone's consenting to having sex with a particular person, they leave the room, someone else comes in and continues, which is obviously an awful sort of circumstance. Just because obviously that person has consented to having sex with one person doesn't mean they're consenting to having sex with another person, even if they think it's that person. The second dot point there is a really important one, which is if the person does not say or do anything to show affirmative consent, then there is no consent. So they have to actually say yes. And like I was talking about before, ideally that's an enthusiastic yes. It's not just a soft yes. It's really, I'm excited. Yes, let's do this. And the last point there is similar to another point I already made, which is if they say yes now, but then they change their mind 5 seconds down the track or tomorrow or later on, that means there's no longer consent to either continue or to engage in sexual activity again. So what offences relate to consent? So you've got some offences on the screen. They're pretty standard sort of things, as you would expect. The point I'll make here is an important point, which is the third one, acting in concert, or also known as group offending or complicity. What this means is even if you are not the primary offender, like you're not the primary person who does the sexual assault, who touches the other person without consent or whatever it is, if you are seen to be involved or you are seen to be encouraging or something of that nature towards the primary offender, then you are also guilty of the same offence. So quite simply, if someone is touching another person without consent and you're there like egging them on or something like that, while you didn't do anything except for egg them on, you can still be charged with sexual assault and you can be found guilty and have sexual assault go on your record. You will be obviously treated as not the primary offender, but you are still guilty of that same offence, which the takeaway there is, obviously ideally if you see something bad happening, intervene and try and help the victim, but at the very least, do not be involved. Get away. Do not be seen as being encouraging or involved in any way. Otherwise, you too might be guilty of the same offence. I'm going to try another video, and we'll see how this one goes. I am mindful that it was a bit laggy, but hopefully the videos are you're still getting the message, because I think the audio is working fine. It's just the video with it is a bit laggy. So let's have a go at this other one. This is basically an example. This is Legal Aid published this video, an example of a situation where there are issues as to whether consent was given.
Hey, Chiclet? You sleep okay?
Sort of. Better get up, Jimmy. It's 4 o'clock.
Phone's dead. Too much YouTube. You should have slept.
I'll just sleep later.
Said I'm sorry.
I know.
It's just, I think you're a super hot girl and I can't help it.
You should have asked me if I wanted to do anything. You just went ahead and did stuff.
I thought you liked what we did. I thought you liked having sex with me. I'll call you later. Okay? Chiclet.
You should have asked me.
So back to me. Again, I'm hoping that video was good enough for you to follow what was happening. I think the audio was fine, but the quality of the video was a little bit poor. I'm sorry for that. But just, it's obviously really obvious points to make from this. One of the key points to make is he says, I thought you liked what we were doing, after she says you should have asked. And remember, I might even go back to what is not consent in the law, if this doesn't take me too long, just a little bit of a lag. So the second point here, well, I'll wait for the screen to catch up to you. But the second point here on this slide is, if the person does not say or do anything to show consent, then there is no consent. And what she's basically saying is, you should have asked, you just went ahead and did stuff without asking. And he said, oh, I thought you were liking it. So basically what he's saying is, I thought you were sort of consenting without words, maybe just based on your reaction and stuff like that and what I thought you were thinking. And that's not good enough, unfortunately, for him. Not unfortunately, that's absolutely how it should be. And it goes back to what I said with respect for relationships, which is, it needs to be an affirmative and enthusiastic yes. It needs to be excitement. It needs to be you making clear that they are comfortable and that they are keen and excited to continue. Her not saying anything is clearly not good enough. And the law says quite clearly that from her not saying anything and him just doing that, even though he thought it was okay at the time, he has actually committed a sexual offence because he did not have consent. And of course, his comments about you're just really hot or whatever he said. Obviously, just because someone's really attractive and you want to touch them or whatever it is, doesn't give you permission to do that. Of course, it's like, that goes without saying. So moving on from that, I'm just going to check if there's anything in the Q&A. Hold on a second. I'm going to check if there's anything in the Q&A. Just give me a moment. So nothing in the Q&A, but as I said at the start, if you have any questions as we go, please feel free to chuck them in there and I'll see if I can get to them. I'm just going to go back to my screen, and this next section before we get to the quiz is what are the age of consent laws? So this is talking about if you are a teenager underage, what are the rules about how old the other person can be for you to be engaging in sexual activity with them? So the first one, the table speaks for itself, but the first one there, if you're under 12, you can't consent, even if that person thinks they understand, they want to do it, the law says they cannot give consent. If you're aged between 12 and 15, there's this 24-month rule. So you can engage in sexual activity with someone who is within 24 months older or within 24 months younger, so long as they're not under 12. So long as it's within that 24-month rule, you can be engaging in sexual activity with them. And then if you are 16 or 17, it sort of goes, there's a different rule depending on if they're younger or older. But if you're 16 or 17 engaging in sexual activity with someone younger than you, the 24-month rule applies. So if you're 16 and the other person's 14, you've just got to be careful that it's within 24 months. But if you are 16 or 17 engaging in sexual activity with someone older than you, there is no cap on how old they can be. Technically, you can have sex with anyone or you can engage in sexual activity with anyone who is older once you turn 16. But there is a rule saying that they can't be in what's called a position of of authority or in a position of care or supervision of you. And so a clear type of example of this might be something like a coach, like a sporting coach or a teacher or a tutor or something like that. Someone who clearly has an authoritative position in your life or in relation to you. And then even if there is consent, even if you're both happy to do it and you both know what you're doing and you're both keen to do it, the young person can't get in trouble. The young person doesn't commit an offence. It's the older person that's committing an offence because they were or are in that position of authority. It becomes a bit of a grey area if, say, let's just say it's your coach, your sport coach or something like that, hey? And say they were coaching you last year, but they're no longer coaching you, and you're 17 and they're 21. Can you engage in sexual activity now that they're no longer coaching you? That becomes a grey area. But just be very careful if that's what you're engaging in. But again, it's not the younger person that gets in trouble. It's the older person. So having sort of explained the laws around what is consent, what is not consent, what are the age of consent laws, I'm now going to ask if people would like to join this Menti quiz. So what you do, if you've got a device, quite simply go to that website, www.menti.com. Once you go on that website, it'll have I'm going to actually do it on my own phone just to make sure it's working. You enter that code and it will help you. It will allow you to join the quiz. So I'm doing it on my own phone at the moment. So I'll give everyone a little moment if you're interested in participating in the quiz. So these are all just going to be a bunch of questions about what we've just talked about. So I am going to change my screen and pull up the quiz. Okay. All right, so I'm in the quiz now. So I think you should be able to see my screen where I'm on the same Menti page just blown up. So I'm just going to go across now and start opening up the quiz for people to. Okay. All right, so I can see a bunch of people, it looks like, are joining. We've got about 10, 15 or so, which is good. I'm going to just give everyone maybe another 30 seconds or so. Yeah, I can see more people joining because I am mindful that some of you might be in a classroom, so maybe you don't have your device on you didn't have time at the start. So I'm just going to give it a little bit more time. Thanks for joining, everyone. So just so you know what we're in for, it's a short thing. It's four questions about the content we just discussed. And there's 30 seconds to answer each question. So you've got quite a bit of time, particularly if you're using a device for a whole group. And the quicker you answer, the more points you get. And then after each question, you'll see the leaderboard. And you can create your name, which means you can just create an anonymous name, whatever you like. You don't have to use your own name, of course. Okay, we've got a bunch of people participating. Let's get this started, I think. So, all right, here's the first question. I'm going to read it out, but we've got 30 seconds. J is sitting next to L, who is very drunk and is touching her sexually. M and S are laughing at J and watching. R notices this happen, but is not involved. Has anyone committed an offence here? So remember the rules around if you're involved or if you seem to be encouraging. That was a quick 30 seconds, I felt. I hope that's correct. Okay, look. All right, so I think you can see on the screen here what everyone put in. So the correct answer is J, M, and S have committed an offence, but R has not. And the reason why is because the law says that if you are involved or you seem to be encouraging, then you can be guilty of the same offence. So clearly an offence has been committed by J because touching someone who is very drunk, there's no consent given. And if someone's very drunk, arguably they can't give consent. But then there are two people, M and S, who are laughing. And I guess the implication there or the inference is the laughing is sort of egging on the primary perpetrator, the primary offender. And so you seem to be encouraging or involved in a certain way. R notices this happen but is not involved. So I guess if you've answered that R should be guilty of an offence, you're not completely wrong. Police might investigate that and consider it. It really depends, how far is R away from where it's happening? Are they, right next to them, like 1 metre away, or are they in the other room? Because mere presence can be sometimes considered being involved. But the starting point would be if they're not involved and they've just seen it happen, they're not guilty. So let's go to the next screen and see how everyone fared in terms of the ladder. So 8 people, I think, got it right. And there's the ladder. So Sus, who's the king or queen, has got the lead. All right, next question. So question 2. All right, Lucy is 15 and her birthday is in December. Sam is 17 and his birthday is in June, so next month. They're in a consensual sexual relationship. Has anyone committed an offence here? And the hint is, have a think about those rules about when you're when you're around that age. What's the rule around the age gap between the two of you? Sam's about to turn 18 next month. Lucy's 15 now, turning 16 in December. What do we think? All right, time's up. All right, 15 people said Sam has committed an offence and got it correct. Well done. The 7 people that said no offence has been committed. It is consensual, so technically they probably both know what they're doing. They probably both interested. You assume they're both keen to do it. Maybe there's like an enthusiastic yes, like I talked about. But Sam's turning 18 next month, and so Sam's going to be 18. Lucy's still going to be 15. That's clearly breaching the 24-month rule. And so even if they do want to be doing what they're doing, the law says that they can't. And it's not the younger person that can get in trouble, it's the older person. The responsibility is always on the older person. That's why the second answer is not correct. It's why it's only Sam, the older person, that's committed an offence. Check out the leaderboard. Let's see if Sus got that one right. Sus got it wrong, so Sus has lost the lead. Sorry to hear. Zlatan, I'm not sure if that's Zlatan Ibrahimovic, maybe, joining our session, which is pretty cool. That's a joke. He's a soccer player. Anyway, so Zlatan's got the lead. Here's question 3. All right, Abdul is 22. His boyfriend Christian is 17. They've been engaging in consensual sexual activity together. Have either of them committed an offence? So have a think about, again, those rules. We went on that sort of last slide. We were on about what are the rules about the age limits when you are certain age. It is pretty confusing. What do we think? 5 seconds. All right. Very well done, everyone. Well, a large percentage. So 4 people have said Abdul has committed an offence, and I can see where you're coming from, because a 5-year age gap, you start to think ethically, is that really appropriate? It can certainly be, but you're unsure of it, because one person's maybe in high school, the other person's, possibly like finished their uni degree. It's a very big difference in age, obviously. But the law says that when you are 16 or 17, you can engage in sexual activity with someone any age above you. Could be 50, obviously, like any age. So long as that older person is not in a position of authority or care or supervision or something of that nature. I talked about a coach or a tutor or a teacher, something like that. But 20 people got that right, so well done. Let's see how our ladder's going. So this is question 3. We've got one more question before I get back onto the content. We've got Zlatan did well again there, got it right. We're pretty tight up the top with Anonymous and Zlatan. Let's see how we go with the 4th question. 4th and final question. Try and answer as quick as you can to get the most points. Here we go. Okay, M and A are both 14 and in a relationship. One night, M tries to touch A sexually, but A refuses. M keeps trying, and eventually eventually A says yes and gives in. So A does give consent in the end, but she's been pressured. What do we think about that? Has a sexual offence been committed by M or A or both? All right, 5 seconds. All right. Well done again, everyone. Em has committed an offence. This one is very similar to that video we watched. No, actually not. It's not similar to the video. It's similar to something I talked about before, which was if you're pressured, that means there's no consent. So even though it says that A gave in and basically said yes or just allowed it, that doesn't mean there is consent. It needs to be a clear yes. A lack of any consent is no consent. So there's that. But even if there's a yes after lots and lots of pressure, then that consent is not good consent and an offence has been committed. So, but it's obvious. I mean, don't pressure someone into engaging in sexual activity. Make sure they want to give an enthusiastic yes. They're excited. They're keen to do it. It's a really big thing. So obviously don't pressure people is the takeaway there. So let's see the ladder. Let's see if Zlatan has still got the lead. I think, it's going to be tight. I think Zlatan's going to win this. All right, Zlatan, well done, whoever you are. You might be the real Zlatan Ibrahimovic, or you might be someone else. But well done, everyone, for doing that. And what I'll do here, oh, no, I won't do this. I don't think we really have time. I was going to allow you to put questions in, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit the quiz and I'm going to turn that off and I'm going to go to the Q&A just for a moment. It looks like we've got nothing there that needs to be answered. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides. So thanks everyone for participating. I hope that was kind of interesting and helped you sort of reflect on what I've explained to you, because sometimes just hearing explain it doesn't really sink in until you have to grapple with a question. So let's go to sexting, and it's 10:08, so we've got about 12 or so minutes left before I want to try and wrap up and allow people to ask questions. So sexting. All right, I'll go into the full screen. So why do we have to talk about sexting, hey? Well, as this slide says, because you're doing it. And when I say you, I'm talking, this presentation is pitched at around like a year 9, year 10 level. And there's a study which I've sort of tried to graphic in this slide back from 2017, but it's still probably relevant, which says the first point there, 9 out of 10 young people surveyed said that their friends were sending nudes or sexting. So 1 out of 3 people say they had experienced sexting. So maybe more people think it's happening than it is, but clearly it is quite prevalent, quite common among that age group. And so it's really important, obviously, for young people to know what the laws are to protect themselves, but also to protect themselves from having, their material shared without consent or whatever, but also to protect them from doing the wrong thing and committing an offence. So what is sexting? And sexting, I think we know what it is. Well, actually, I think a lot of people think sexting is, and it probably is more colloquially, text messages, like sexual, talking about sexual activity or whatever. But in the context of the law, which I'm going to be talking about here, sexting is talking mainly about images or videos that are sent via the internet. So what's the internet? Like social media, texting, whatever, where they are sexual in nature, and usually whether they're sexual in nature is pretty obvious. So that's what sexting is here in this legal context, which I'm talking about today. So I was talking about sharing intimate material about yourself, or receiving or requesting, intimate material from someone else. Now, sexting can be illegal, okay? And we're going to talk about some of these laws which say it is illegal and what the exceptions are, particularly for adolescents, so for teenagers. What are the exceptions? What can you do? What can't you do? So I'll just go through this first law, which is, it is a crime to share someone's sexual picture or intimate image without their consent. Pretty obvious, I think. It's also a crime to threaten to do so. So even if you don't go ahead and do it, if you make the threat, that is still an offence. And it's important to know that someone under 18 cannot consent to their photo being shared. So even if they say, yeah, you can share it with your friends or whatever, if they're 17 years old, that's not consent. And if you go and share it, you've committed this offence here. When we're talking about sexual material, images, photos, images or videos of someone under 18, the starting point is that it's what's called child pornography, okay? Any material of someone under 18 or who looks under 18, that whether engaging sexual activity or it's a sexual, sort of a sexual nature, the starting point is it's child pornography, okay? There are exceptions, so don't freak out that you can't do this. You can in certain circumstances, but the starting point is it's child pornography and therefore it's an offence to do any of the things on the screen here, to even make it, to send it, to have possession of it, or to ask someone for it, okay? All those things are child pornography offences, but they are designed to capture adults. They're not designed to capture necessarily teenagers sharing between themselves, so long as you do it within the exceptions, which I'll talk about. Okay, what are the exceptions in Victoria? Okay, I don't know if we've got anyone in the audience from different states, but there are different rules in different states. These are exceptions in Victoria only, which are exceptions that I think you'd expect. The first one, if you are, you're allowed to create and send a photo of yourself, like an intimate sexual photo of yourself, if you are a teenager. So yeah, it would be child pornography if it gets into the wrong hands maybe, or if an adult is requesting it from you, but you are yourself allowed to create that and send it to someone. You're not going to get in trouble for doing that, okay? Second exception, this is about if you sort of receive it, okay? Or if you have it on your phone or your computer. So if you're under 18, you are allowed to receive it and you are allowed to keep it if the other person is also under 18. So you're both under 18 and that 24-month rule comes into play again. So as long as you're not breaching that 24-month rule, you're allowed to keep it if you're both under 18, but you are not allowed to share it with anyone else, okay? Even if the other person consents. So let's say person A is 16, sends it to person B who is 17, that's fine, it's within 24 months, it's consensual, they do it of their own accord. Person B can't then share it on to one of their friends who is also 17, even if person A says yes, because remember, if we go back to that slide before, someone under 18 cannot consent to their image being shared to a third party, okay, to another person. They can share it to whoever they want, but they can't consent to then that other person sharing it to their friends or someone else. What happens if you break this law? Well, obvious things. You can get charged by police, and if you're found guilty at court, you'll get a record. You could go on the sex offenders register. Some really sexual offences, sharing material is treated really seriously, and the primary reason for that is it can really ruin someone's life. If you're 15 years old and you've shared someone, you know, who you think is safe, you've shared an intimate material photo with someone who you think it's safe, and they've gone and shared it, that can get around so quickly, obviously, in this day and age, and it can have disastrous impacts for the person who thought they were just safely sharing it to one person, and that's why the court treats it very seriously. We don't really have time to look at this video, so I'm going to skip past it, but the video is basically talking about someone who has intimate material from like a boyfriend or something, and then they're hanging out with their friend and they show them. So even if so long as they're underage, even if the other person is consenting to them sharing with a friend, they can't do that, okay? But it is okay in the first instance for two teenagers to be sharing intimate materials between themselves, so long as they don't breach that 24-month rule, and so long as they're both under 18. All right, now I'm going to do a quiz, a true-false quiz to finish off. Before I do that, I've got a question here in the Q&A. Okay, if the question here in the Q&A is, if someone under 18 sends you a picture of someone else under 18, is the person receiving the image in trouble legally? Well, yeah, technically you can't have possession of something because you got that through the wrong means, and you don't have consent to have that image. And so if you receive an image from someone else, right, who's of someone who's under 18, the obligation is to delete it. So you can't keep that on your phone, okay? Obviously the person who shared it is committing the primary offense, but if you receive something you shouldn't have, technically also it's an offense to be in possession of that, so you should delete it. if you have been sent that from a particular person and it's their image, it's okay to keep it. But if it's someone else's image, which is just doing the rounds and you've got it, you can't be in possession of that and you have to delete it because it would be considered child pornography and one of the exceptions don't apply. Okay. Now I'm going to launch some polls. Let's go back to this slide. So the first one, here's the question. So there's going to just be a few sort of true and false polls to finish off the session. I'll read the question, then I'll launch the poll. So you're 15, your 16-year-old boyfriend sends you a sexy pic. Under Victorian laws, it's okay for you to keep it. I'm going to launch this poll. And okay. So that poll should be coming up on your screen. So you're 15, your 16-year-old boyfriend sends you a sexy pic. Under Victorian laws, you can keep it. So have a think here about, yes, it's child pornography, but what are those exceptions? And the main exception to think about, are both of you under 18? And is the 24-month rule breached? All right. So I'm going to end the poll. And I'm going to share results. I'm going to sort of rush through this a little bit because we haven't got much time. But you should see the results on your screen, I think. So 71% of people said it's true that you can keep it, and that's correct. So the starting point is it's of someone underage, so it is child pornography, but the exception says you can send intimate material between you and one other person, so long as you're not breaching the 24-month rule and so long as that other person doesn't share it on, which isn't the case here. So if you've been sent it by your partner who's not more than 24 months older than you, you can keep it on your phone. Okay. Now let's go back and let's go to the next question. All right, next question, which I'll launch the poll in a moment. You are 17. A girl you're seeing at uni sends you a nude photo. It's not child pornography because she's an adult, so therefore it's okay to keep it. Okay, I'm going to launch this second poll. So what do we think? True, false again. Is it okay to keep this? You're 17. We're just going to assume for the purpose of this that the other person is overage, so an adult. They've sent you it. Can you keep it? All right. So I'm going to end the poll there. So share results. So a bit of a split here. 60% said true, 40% said false. The answer is that it's true. It's okay for you to keep it because the images of someone who is overage, okay? So it's not child pornography. So those rules around can you have it or can you not have it don't come into play. And an adult can freely share their intimate material with someone else. So in this case, it's not child pornography. So long as they've sent it to you by their own volition, there's no pressure, it's okay for you to keep it. I'll launch poll question 3 here. I won't go back to the slide. I think I'll just launch it. So your friend in year 9 sends you a pic of herself in bed naked. She says, share the love with your mates if you like. And so you go ahead and send it to some of your friends. It's okay to do this because she gave consent. What do we think? So let's say you're in year 9. So let's assume you're around 15 or something. She's given you the image and she said, go and share it with whoever you want. Is it okay that you shared it? Because she said you could. All right, I might end the poll there. All right, so let me share those results and see what everyone said. So everyone, 100% of people that submitted an answer said false, and 100% of you are correct. So in this instance, it's similar to, I guess, the consent stuff. It's like in certain circumstances, the law says that young people, teenagers, can't give consent to do certain things. And one of those things is that this young person who created their own image and sent it to, say, their partner, cannot then consent to it being shared far and wide. They can send it to whoever they want, but they can't consent to someone else sharing it. It's a bit of a technicality, but that's the law. And so even though she said, yeah, go ahead and do it, that is not consent per the law, and therefore it would be a criminal offence to go and share it. Obviously, the police will take into account that you probably didn't know and you thought it was okay, but the law says that you can't do that. So let's go. Last question in the polls. Let's launch this one. All right. So this one says, your ex texts you and says, I'm over it. I don't want to go out with you anymore. You text back, take that back or you'll be sorry. Remember those secret pics? I can easily send them to everyone. What you're saying is illegal and a criminal offence, even if you don't go through with it. True or false? So basically, you haven't sent. So you've got some secret pics. Let's assume they're intimate. You haven't sent them to anyone, all right, without consent, but you've essentially threatened to, or there's sort of, it's a little bit of a, I don't know if that's a threat, but it says I can easily send them to everyone. So it's sort of like it's hinting at a threat, but you haven't actually done it. What do we think? Is that a criminal offence or is that not? Is it only a criminal offence once you actually go ahead and do it? What do we think? All right, I might just end that there. Share results. So again, everyone nailed it. 100% of people that responded said true, which is correct. So you might remember back to that slide where I said it is an offence to share someone's, even if they're over age or regardless of age, if they don't consent, sharing someone's intimate material like a photo or a video, it's pretty obvious that's a criminal offence. But it's also an offence if you threaten to do it. And I guess the idea around that is it's pretty scary if someone threatens to do that. You're in a really vulnerable position having sent them something and you trusted them, and now they're threatening to go and share that, which could you really damage your life. So any threat of that nature is a criminal offence. I mean, is this a threat? It probably is. If you read between the lines, it hasn't said I will send them. It just says I can easily send them. But I think the courts would find that is a threat. So I'll stop sharing there. And what I'll do is I'll go back to my screen. I've got another question in the chat. So there's a question in the chat which says, could it be sharing if you just show someone on your own phone? Do you need it to be sent through like the internet or socials? Yes, it is still an offence to show someone on your phone intimate material that you're not allowed to show. So obviously it's a lot harder for maybe someone to prove that happened, or for police to charge and prove it at court. But technically, yes, you can't share it by any means. So it's even showing or any form of internet or social media or anything. Okay. I'm just going to go back to my slides and just wrap up the session. So these are just slides for the true false. All right. A couple last slides, which is where to get help. So if you are a victim of any of this sort of thing, so the stuff we've talked about today can be pretty heavy in reality if you're experiencing it. Pretty heavy is probably an understatement, let's be honest. So if you have got issues with a relationship, issues with consent, you think you've been a victim of sexual assault, or you've been a victim of someone sharing your intimate material with it illegally, where to get help. So I think the first point is to talk to someone that you trust, and that might be a friend, a family member, maybe a teacher that you trust, something like that. but there are specialist services that are available to help young people, like teenagers such as yourselves, to manage and deal with this. So the Kids Helpline, I think you've all heard of that, but there's other ones called Centre Against Sexual Assault, CASA, you might have heard of that. But you can also contact a legal service to get some information and advice about what your rights are, what your options are, and what services are available to you. So you can come to us, but you can also contact police. And you can to report to police, there's an online reporting portal now, which makes things like this maybe a bit easier. You can report it without actually having to go in and talk to someone, which is a little bit less stressful. But give us a call, and I'll go to the next slide where we've got our details. Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Give us a call if you want any information or advice about, what I've talked about today, or about your own personal experience, and want to know what your rights and options are in that respect. Okay, so what time is it? 10:27. On that note, I don't actually have time for Q&A. I'm going to have a really quick look to see if there's anything else in there. There's nothing else in there, but please get in touch with Youthlaw. My name's Tim Hutton. If you'd like to ask any questions about what was discussed today, VLF, Victorian Law Foundation, will send around a link to the recording so you can watch it and share it. And we'll also send around the slides so you've got all that information. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I'll turn back to Fab if you're there.
Hi, Tim. Yes, I just wanted to say thank you so much for a fantastic session. I think from the responses to the various polls, you could see all the attendees were listening and they were understanding, because it was fantastic to see what a high percentage of correct answers we were getting to the different polls. As Tim said, we'll be sending out a link to the recordings that will include all of the contact information for Youthlaw. So if you do want to follow up with Tim or anyone else at Youthlaw, all the contact details will be included in the link to the recording. So I just want to say thanks again, Tim, for participating in Law Week. I'm sure all the attendees got a lot out of this session, and I hope that everyone has been able to participate in Law Week, enjoy this session, and we'll see you again soon, I'm sure, during the year. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Fab. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.